I just got back from military deployment when an HOA president blocked my family's ranch, called the cops, and told them to leave land we've owned since 1952. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the wrong veteran. You're trespassing. Move away from community land. That's what the HOA president told me while standing on the ranch my family has possessed since 1952. I just gotten back from an 18-month military deployment. Dirt still covering my boots. Duffel bag thrown in my pickup bed. I arrive at the entrance of my family's 200-acre ranch, and an immaculate white Mercedes blocks the way. She's already calling 911. Officer, there's someone refusing to vacate our land. Sirens began echoing through the valley. I approached her, holding the original deed my grandfather registered decades before her entire development even existed. She maintained her smile, confident, certain I was moments from arrest. She had zero clue that one call would trigger a court battle that would demolish everything she constructed. What would you do if strangers attempted to take your family's ranch? Where are you watching from? Let me rewind and explain how this entire disaster started. Stone Creek Ranch has belonged to my family for 3 generations. My grandfather, resilient old guy named Frank Stone, claimed this land back in 1952 with nothing but determination and a handshake agreement with the county. 200 acres of excellent Texas hill country, rolling fields, original growth timber, and a natural creek that flows clear and cold all year. I'm 3rd-generation Army Corps of Engineers trained in infrastructure, water rights, and land surveying. The military taught me precision documentation and how to plan 3 steps ahead, abilities that were about to prove extremely useful. The ranch isn't merely a pretty landscape. We operate cattle, host a county fair every summer, and my workshop has rescued more neighbors from mechanical problems than I can remember. When Mrs. Rodriguez's tractor failed during harvest, guess who dedicated his weekend repairing it for free? When the Hendersons needed hay after that drought in 2019, guess whose barn doors remained open? But 3 years ago, everything began shifting. Bradley Whitfield's construction firm built Meadowbrook Estates. This luxury development right alongside our property line. Large houses, manicured lawns, and HOA regulations thicker than a dictionary. The houses sold quickly to city people wanting that country lifestyle without any actual country obligations. Karen Whitfield, Bradley's wife, declared herself HOA president before the paint settled on the first house. 45 years old, former pharmaceutical sales representative, operates that white Mercedes like it's a weapon. She's got this method of using words like community standards and property values that makes your skin crawl. The trouble began small. Karen would cruise by our fence line capturing pictures. Then came complaints to the county about our unsightly agricultural activities. The scent of fresh hay and leather in the barn mixing with that chemical smell from new construction told the whole story. Old Texas colliding with suburban entitlement. When I returned from deployment last month, I discovered HOA violation notices taped to my front door. $500 daily in penalties for unauthorized livestock activities in a residential zone. My cattle, Roosevelt the bull and his ladies, were apparently violating someone's aesthetic preferences. Mrs. Rodriguez, bless her heart, briefed me over coffee. That HOA woman's been here 3 times, mijo, measuring things, capturing pictures, asking questions about your water rights. The rough wooden gate post where Grandpa carved Stone Creek 1952 had fresh scratches around it, like someone had attempted to remove his handiwork. But Karen's opening move was pure genius in an evil mastermind kind of way. She employed a surveyor to re-establish proper boundary lines and filed a complaint claiming our ranch access road fell under HOA jurisdiction, the same road Grandpa constructed in 1952, maintained by the county for 70 years. 2 days after I arrived home, Karen rolled up with some attorney in a shiny BMW, got out like she controlled the place, clipboard in hand, demanding we remove all livestock within 48 hours or face significant legal consequences. I stood there in my work jeans and boots, looking at this woman in her business suit, instructing me to eliminate cattle that had been grazing this land since before she was born. Roosevelt, my prize bull, chose that exact moment to lumber over the fence and stare at her Mercedes like it had personally offended him. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level, This ranch has been functioning under agricultural exemption since 1952. We're grandfathered under county zoning. Karen's smile got sharper. Not according to our community attorney. This entire area is now residential. Your little hobby farm is diminishing property values for legitimate homeowners. Hobby farm. 70 years of Stone family sweat and sacrifice. And she called it a hobby farm. As they drove away, kicking up dust with their fancy cars, I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. Karen had just declared war on the wrong veteran. Karen didn't waste time escalating. Within a week, she filed formal complaints with the county, claiming our ranch violated residential zoning laws. Then, she employed her own surveyor, some guy in pressed khakis who'd never seen a day of honest work, to reestablish proper boundaries. But here's where Karen's city girl ignorance started showing. She spread rumors of the country club that our ranch was an unsanitary health hazard, apparently not realizing that half the country club members purchase their beef from ranches just like ours. The rumor mill operates both ways in small towns, and word got back to me fast. The real kicker: Karen sent certified letters to all our neighbors encouraging them to file noise complaints about cattle operations that had been running peacefully for decades. Mrs. Rodriguez brought me a copy, shaking her head. "This woman's got more nerve than a toothache," she said, which in Texas means you've really crossed a line. Now, the Army taught me that when someone attacks, you don't just defend, you gather intelligence. So, I spent 3 days at the county courthouse digging through property records like I was searching for IEDs in a rock pile. And boy, did I find some buried treasure. Turns out Meadowbrook Estates was built using something called overlay zoning. Sounds fancy, but here's what it really means. The county let Bradley construct his subdivision, while acknowledging that existing properties kept their original zoning rights. Our ranch maintained its agricultural exemption, grandfathered from 1952. Karen's neighborhood was basically built around us, not over us. But the real bombshell was in the original county planning meeting minutes from 2019. Bradley Whitfield himself argued that keeping the ranch would add rustic charm and authentic character to the community. He literally used our ranch as a selling point to buyers, then sent his wife to harass us out of existence. I called Nolan McCarthy, our family attorney, and a guy who's been fighting property battles since before Karen was born. Retired county prosecutor knows where all the legal bodies are buried. When I showed him the documents, he started grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "Son," he said, "you got them dead to rights, but let's do this properly." We ordered a new professional survey using the original 1952 boundary markers. Iron pins Grandpa drove himself still there after 70 years. The results were beautiful. Not only was our agricultural exemption rock solid, but Karen's precious community entrance with its fancy stone pillars and HOA signs was built 15 feet onto our property. 15 feet of illegal trespass decorated with their own violation notices. I filed the trespass notice on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Karen showed up at the county inspector demanding an immediate cattle inspection. She had this satisfied look like she was about to spring some trap. "Ma'am," the inspector said, looking confused as he reviewed our paperwork. "This ranch has been here longer than the county zoning office. Everything's in perfect order." Karen's face went through about 6 different shades of red. "That's impossible." Our attorney said, "Your attorney was misinformed." The inspector cut her off. Agricultural exemptions don't expire just because someone builds houses nearby. That's when Karen made her first real mistake. Instead of backing down gracefully, she got personal. "I don't care what some dusty old papers say. I won't have this neighborhood turned into some backwoods cattle operation. I'll make his life miserable until he sells." The inspector actually took a step back, threatening harassment in front of a county official. That's admitting to a crime. But my favorite part of this whole mess was Roosevelt's reaction to Karen's car horn. Every morning she'd drive by and honk, trying to spook the cattle, I guess. But Roosevelt, being a bull with opinions, would position himself right at the fence line and just stare at her Mercedes. Not aggressive, just judgmental. The neighbors started bringing coffee to watch the daily staring contest. Mrs. Rodriguez called it better than cable TV. Here's something most people don't know about property law. Agricultural exemptions don't just protect your right to farm. They actually give you special legal standing against harassment. When someone tries to force you off agricultural land using residential zoning rules, they're essentially attempting theft of protected property rights. The takeaway: never assume new zoning laws override old property rights. Grandfather protections often trump local ordinances. As Karen drove away that day, spinning her wheels and throwing gravel, I knew she was going to escalate again. The morning mist was rising from the creek, carrying that clean smell of wild mint and fresh water. It reminded me why 3 generations of Stones had fought to keep this place. Karen wanted a war. She was about to get one. Karen's next move proved she'd learned absolutely nothing from round 1. 2 weeks later, the HOA voted to improve community drainage by redirecting our natural creek flow. Their excuse? Ranch runoff was creating mosquito breeding hazards that threatened their children's safety. Pure garbage, but clever garbage. Karen had done her homework on environmental regulations and found a bureaucratic angle to attack us. She hired contractors to dig a diversion channel on HOA property, claiming it was preventive flood control. The sound of heavy machinery digging at dawn told me everything I needed to know about Karen's respect for neighborly courtesy. Diesel fuel mixed with disturbed earth, creating that sharp industrial smell that doesn't belong in ranch country. But Karen wasn't done. She filed a complaint with the state environmental agency, claiming our cattle were polluting the waterway. Then came the social media campaign. Ring doorbell footage edited to make our gentle cattle look like rampaging buffalo, posted with captions like "Protect our children from agricultural runoff." Here's where my Corps of Engineers training came in handy. I know water rights law better than most lawyers, and Karen had just walked into quicksand. That creek has been running through Stone property since before Texas was a state. Our homestead deed from 1952 includes something called riparian rights, legal protections for landowners adjacent to waterways. These rights don't disappear when someone builds houses downstream. More importantly, any creek diversion that affects water flow to existing users requires consent from all riparian rights holders. Karen's contractors were literally violating federal environmental law, one shovel full at a time. I spent a weekend documenting the natural watershed, using mapping techniques the Army taught me for combat engineering projects. Took water quality samples upstream and downstream of our ranch. Guess what? Our water was cleaner than what was flowing out of the subdivision, where lawn fertilizer and storm drain runoff were the real pollution sources. Then I made some calls. The Texas Water Development Board doesn't mess around with unauthorized creek modifications. When I explained that an HOA was attempting to divert natural water flow without permits, their enforcement division got very interested very quickly. The environmental impact study they required revealed something beautiful. Karen's planned diversion would actually flood 3 houses during spring rains. The engineering was so bad it threatened the very neighborhood she claimed to protect. Now, here's a knowledge nugget that saved my ranch. Riparian rights are some of the strongest property protections in American law. They often supersede local zoning because water law predates most municipal regulations. The simple rule: water rights run with the land, not with zoning changes. 3 days after I filed my complaint with the state, Karen received a cease and desist order. $10,000 per day in fines until the diversion was filled in and the creek restored. I was standing in my workshop when she got the news, and I swear I heard her scream from half a mile away. But the real victory came when the state water inspector showed up. Professional guy, been doing environmental assessments for 20 years. He took one look at our operation and started asking about our conservation practices. "You folks are doing everything right," he said, watching our cattle drink from the creek under the shade of 70-year-old oak trees. "This is how sustainable ranching is supposed to work." Roosevelt chose that moment to wade into the shallow water, cooling his massive bulk while dragonflies dance around his horns. Creek stones worn smooth by decades of natural flow clicked together under his hooves, a sound my grandfather had heard, that my father had heard, that I'd grown up with. The inspector wrote in his report that our ranch operation actually improved local water quality through natural filtration and erosion control. Meanwhile, The subdivision storm drainage was introducing fertilizer runoff and road chemicals into the watershed. Karen's environmental complaint backfired so completely that the state recommended our ranch as a model for sustainable water management. They even suggested the subdivision adopt our conservation practices. But here's what really burned Karen up. The local newspaper picked up the story. Local ranch prays for environmental stewardship, while HOA faces fines for illegal creek modification. The article included a photo of Roosevelt drinking from the crystal clear creek, looking like the king of the countryside. Mrs. Rodriguez brought me 3 copies of that newspaper, grinning ear to ear. "Mijo," she said, "sometimes the good guys do win." The evening quiet was particularly sweet that day, broken only by natural sounds, cattle lowing softly, creek water flowing over stones, and a distant sound of contractors filling in Karen's illegal drainage ditch. Karen was about to learn that when you mess with Texas water rights, Texas water law messes back. Karen's third assault came through the city code enforcement office, and this time she brought backup. Multiple citations arrived in my mailbox, like legal cluster bombs, unsafe barn structures, improper vehicle storage, fence height violations, and my personal favorite, operating an unlicensed auto repair business because I fixed neighbors' equipment in my workshop. The code enforcement officer was a guy named Dale Kruger, who showed up wearing press khakis and carrying a clipboard like it was a holy relic. Everything about him screamed, never work with his hands. He measured fence heights with a tape measure, photographed every tool in my workshop, and documented tire wear patterns on my ranch truck, like he was investigating a murder. But Dale's visit revealed something interesting. Every single violation referenced residential building codes, requirements that don't apply to agricultural structures. My workshop, built to house heavy equipment, was actually safer than most suburban garages. The barn, constructed with techniques my grandfather learned building Army Corps projects, could probably survive a tornado. Here's where Karen's city background betrayed her again. Agricultural structures are exempt from residential codes under state law. My buildings were built to agricultural standards, which are often stricter than residential requirements because they have to handle heavy machinery and livestock. While Dale was busy measuring things that didn't matter, Karen was spreading rumors about my military service. She'd somehow found records of a disciplinary action for my deployment. What she didn't mention was that I'd refused an illegal order to falsify engineering reports in a combat zone. The Army backed my decision, but Karen presented it as evidence of anger management issues and failure to follow civilian authority. The neighborhood social media went crazy. Posts warning about a dangerous individual with military weapons training living next to their children. Karen even claimed I had threatened her with violence, which was news to me since our only interaction had been that first encounter at my gate. But here's the thing about military training. It teaches you to document everything. I had security camera footage of every encounter, recorded timestamps of every violation notice, and detailed logs of every harassment incident. When Karen's accusations reached the county sheriff, they asked for evidence. 20 minutes later, they were apologizing for wasting my time. Meanwhile, I was digging into Dale Kruger's background and found some fascinating connections. His consulting company had received a $5,000 payment from Whitfield Development just 2 months before my citations began. Municipal records showed Dale had used the same violation tactics against 3 other properties that Bradley wanted to acquire. The pattern was clear. Identify problem properties, harass owners with frivolous code violations, force expensive legal battles until they sell below market value. But Dale made one crucial mistake. He demanded engineering certification for my barn roof, apparently not realizing that I am a licensed professional engineer. When I provided my own certification, he demanded an independent assessment. That's when I called in a favor. My buddy Marcus Schuyler was visiting on leave from the Army Corps, and he happened to be a structural engineer with federal licensing. Marcus took one look at my barn and started laughing. "Garrett, this building's over-engineered by about 200%. Whoever built it knew what they were doing." "My grandfather," I said, "learned construction building Corps projects during the war." Marcus' official federal engineer certification trumped any local code enforcement authority. Dale's clipboard suddenly looked a lot less impressive when faced with actual expertise. Here's your knowledge nugget. Municipal code enforcement officers often don't understand the difference between residential and agricultural building standards. Agricultural structures are typically built stronger because they handle heavier loads and harsher conditions. The simple takeaway: know your zoning classification and what codes actually apply to your property. The community response was shifting to Mrs. Rodriguez organized what she called coffee klatch intelligence networks. Basically, neighborhood ladies sharing information about Karen's tactics. Turns out Karen had approached the feed store owner trying to get ranch suppliers to boycott me. She pressured our veterinarian to drop us as clients. She was systematically trying to strangle our operation economically, but small-town loyalty runs deeper than HOA threats. Doc Martinez, our vet, told Karen exactly where she could stick her demands. The feed store owner, Vietnam veteran who'd known my family for 40 years, suggested Karen might want to find a new place to buy her fancy lawn fertilizer. The morning smell of fresh coffee at these neighbor meetings, mixing with the old would scent of Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen, reminded me why rural communities stick together. We look after each other because out here, your neighbors aren't just people who live nearby. They're your lifeline when trouble comes calling. Karen was about to learn that attacking one ranch family meant taking on an entire community. 3 weeks into Karen's siege, I decided to dig deeper into our property history. Something wasn't adding up about how a subdivision got built so close to our boundaries without triggering easement disputes. So I drove to the state archives in Austin, requesting every document related to the original stone homestead. What I found changed everything. Grandpa's 1952 deed included a clause I'd never paid attention to. Mineral rights, not just oil and gas, but gravel and stone quarrying rights to the entire property. Texas Hill Country is built on limestone, and quality building stone was valuable even back then. But the real bombshell was in the survey maps. The original Stone Creek Ranch included 25 acres that were never officially transferred to the county. Due to a clerical error in 1987, the county had sold land to Bradley's development company that they didn't actually own. Those missing 25 acres included the current HOA community center, the fancy entrance with its stone pillars, and half the subdivision's main road. Karen's HOA had built their entire common area infrastructure on land that still technically belonged to my family. I sat in that archive reading room, surrounded by musty documents and the smell of old paper, trying to process what this meant. The county had sold property without clear title. Bradley's company had purchased land it couldn't legally obtain, and Karen's HOA had invested $800,000 in facilities on property they didn't own. Here's how title law works. You can't get what you don't have. When the county sold our 25 acres to Bradley using a quitclaim deed, they transferred only whatever ownership they actually possessed. Since they never legally obtained our land in the first place, Bradley got nothing. The technical term is defective title, and it invalidates every transaction that followed. Nola McCarthy's reaction when I showed him the documents was priceless. The 70-year-old attorney actually jumped out of his chair and started pacing around his office like a prosecutor who just found the smoking gun. "Son," he said, "they're not just harassing you. They're living on stolen land." The financial implications were staggering. 25 acres of prime developed real estate worth approximately $2.4 million at current market rates. The HOA had unknowingly invested in improvements to property they'd never legally acquired. Their insurance policies were void because you can't insure property you don't own. More importantly, all of Karen's liens and violations against our ranch were legally meaningless. You can't encumber someone's property when you don't have legal standing to file complaints in the first place. But here's where it got really interesting. Texas law requires continuous property tax payments to maintain ownership claims. I drove straight to the county tax office and pulled records going back to 1952. Stone family had been paying taxes on all original acreage every single year, including the disputed 25 acres. The tax assessor, a woman who'd been there since dirt was invented, shook her head when she saw the documents. "Honey, this is the kind of mistake that keeps lawyers in business for generations. Your family never stopped owning that land. The county just forgot to tell anybody. This wasn't just a harassment case anymore. This was potentially systematic fraud involving a county government, a development company, and an HOA that had been illegally formed using defective property titles. I drove home thinking about irony. Karen had spent months trying to steal my ranch through legal harassment, never realizing she was living on land my family actually owned. Every violation notice, every fine, every threat had been coming from people with no legal authority to make them. Roosevelt was waiting at the gate when I got home, probably wondering why I looked like I'd swallowed canary. Big guy, I told him. We just found our ace in the hole. The next morning, Nolan and I spread maps across my kitchen table, like generals planning a campaign. Coffee brewing, legal documents everywhere, and the sweet smell of revenge in the air. We've got two choices, Nolan explained. Quiet title action to establish clear ownership, or nuclear option. Demand immediate removal of all HOA structures from your land. I chose option 3. Force a public hearing where every dirty trick will be exposed under oath with media present. Karen wanted a fight. Let's give her one she'd never forget. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. File for quiet title action with the county, requesting a public hearing to resolve the boundary dispute. Force Karen's HOA to defend their legal standing while knowing they had none. Meanwhile, document every harassment incident until we had enough evidence to destroy them in court. But I wanted insurance, a physical demonstration that would make the property dispute impossible to ignore. Using my Corps of Engineers background, I designed controlled access barriers for the disputed entrance, temporary structures that look permanent but could be removed quickly if needed. The barriers serve dual purposes. They'd block HOA access during their next community meeting, and they'd force acknowledgement of the property dispute. When Karen called police, they had to investigate the underlying ownership question. Mrs. Rodriguez became our unofficial intelligence coordinator. Her kitchen turned into mission control with neighborhood ladies providing real-time updates on HOA activities. The smell of fresh tortillas and strong coffee fueled our planning sessions. That woman's been calling emergency HOA meetings, Mrs. Rodriguez reported, talking about lawsuits and property condemnation. Perfect. Let Karen dig her hole deeper. Meanwhile, I was building our legal case systematically. Professional surveyor confirmed the boundary discrepancies using original 1952 iron markers. Environmental engineer documented that our ranch operations actually improved local water quality. 3 expert witnesses ready to testify about agricultural exemptions, water rights, and property law. But the most important piece was community support. I discovered that most HOA residents had no idea their property titles were defective. When I quietly approached 3 reasonable board members, they were horrified to learn about the legal problems. Here's something most people don't understand about HOA law. Boards have fiduciary responsibility to protect homeowner investments. When leadership pursues personal vendettas that threaten property values, they can be held personally liable for damages. The simple rule: HOA boards must act in community interest, not personal interest. Secret meetings in my workshop revealed that even some HOA members wanted Karen removed. Her extremist tactics were embarrassing the neighborhood and creating legal liability for everyone. They were ready to support reasonable resolution if it protected their home investments. I spent evenings teaching neighbors about property law basics, how to research deed records, understand zoning classifications, verify boundary lines. Knowledge is power, and an educated community couldn't be manipulated by Karen's legal theater. The media strategy was crucial. Local newspaper interested in government error creates property rights conflict angle. Frame the story as innocent homeowners caught in bureaucratic mistake with me as problem solver rather than problem creator. Channel 12 News loved the David versus Goliath narrative. Veteran family ranch threatened by suburban HOA expansion. They scheduled coverage of the county hearing guaranteeing public scrutiny of the proceedings. But the best part was psychological warfare. I studied Karen's pattern. She escalated when publicly challenged, always doubling down instead of backing down. The county hearing would give her rope to hang herself with. Technical preparations included GPS mapping of exact disputed boundaries, engineering assessments of all structures built on our land, and detailed financial analysis of damages caused by the harassment campaign. Legal documents were ready. Proposed settlement agreement offering fair ground lease to HOA, revised property deeds establishing clear boundaries, and yes, countersuit papers if Karen wanted to keep fighting. Contingency plans covered every scenario. If Karen tried sabotage, criminal charges were ready to file. If Bradley attempted legal intimidation, we had evidence of systematic fraud. If the HOA tried emergency action, injunctions were prepared. The workshop became our war room, maps covering every wall surface, evidence organized in military precision, late-night planning sessions with the smell of motor oil and legal briefs. Probably the first time those two scents had mixed. 2 weeks before the hearing, I implemented the physical demonstration. Professional installation of temporary barriers blocking HOA entrance with clear signage, disputed property, legal resolution pending. Karen's reaction was predictable and perfect. Emergency police calls, threatened lawsuits, media interviews claiming illegal blockade of community property. Exactly what we wanted. Every outburst documented, every threat recorded, every illegal claim preserved for court testimony. The neighbors started calling it Operation Checkmate. Roosevelt seemed to approve. He'd taken a standing guard near the new barriers, like he understood we were finally fighting back. 3 days until the county hearing. Karen had no idea she was walking into a trap 70 years in the making. With the county hearing looming, Karen abandoned all pretense of legal harassment and went full scorched earth. Her desperation was showing, and desperate people make stupid mistakes. First came the social media blitz. Karen created fake profiles to flood neighborhood apps with posts about dangerous military extremists threatening community safety. Edited photos made our ranch look like an environmental disaster. Cattle appearing malnourished. Facilities seeming run down. The problem with fake social media campaigns, digital forensics can trace everything. Same IP address, similar writing patterns, identical posting schedules. Karen might have been good at pharmaceutical sales, but she was terrible at cybercrime. Then she targeted our business relationships. Karen pressured the feed store to stop selling us supplies, claiming we were operating illegally and threatening to sue anyone who supported criminal activity. She convinced our veterinarian's office manager to cancel our service contracts, lying about court orders that didn't exist. But small-town loyalty runs deeper than suburban threats. Doc Martinez called me personally. "Garrett, some crazy woman's trying to tell me how to run my practice. Your cattle are the healthiest in the county, and she can take her threats somewhere else." The feed store owner, Vietnam veteran Charlie Rodriguez, Mrs. Rodriguez's husband, had an even better response. He posted Karen's demands on the store bulletin board under a sign reading, "Local busybody for entertainment purposes only." Karen's economic warfare backfired spectacularly, turning local business owners against her HOA. But her dirtiest trick was a restraining order. Karen filed court papers claiming I'd stalked and threatened her, basing the entire complaint on me driving past the HOA entrance on the public road to reach my own property. The hearing was scheduled for the day before our county property hearing, clearly intended to get me arrested and force me to miss the crucial legal deadline. Karen's testimony was a masterpiece of creative fiction. She claimed to feel terrorized by normal ranch operations visible from her property. She described cattle sounds as aggressive animal noises designed to intimidate. She even claimed my workshop activities constituted weapons preparation by unstable veteran. The judge was skeptical but granted a temporary restraining order pending investigation. For 72 hours, I was legally prohibited from approaching HOA property, including the disputed entrance where our cattle normally crossed. Pure genius, actually. Karen had created a legal trap. Either violate the restraining order or abandon normal ranch operations. Both scenarios making me look like the problem. But here's where military training pays off. I hired professional cattle contractors to handle movement, staying clear of the restricted area while documenting that cattle movement predates the subdivision by 70 years. County Animal Control observed the entire operation, verifying safe procedures and proper handling. The veterinarian provided written certification of animal health and welfare. Everything documented, everything professional, everything legal. Karen's sabotage attempts escalated to physical harassment. HOA contractors accidentally damaged our fence during utility work. Anonymous individuals photographed ranch facilities at night, triggering motion sensor lights. Someone filed false animal cruelty complaints trying to get our livestock confiscated. Security cameras caught everything. Motion sensors recorded exact times. Digital evidence preserved in multiple locations, backed up off-site. Chain of custody maintained like evidence in a criminal investigation. The most ridiculous incident involved Karen trying to get our ranch water supply condemned by the health department. She claimed agricultural runoff was contaminating groundwater, demanding immediate testing and possible closure. Health inspectors showed up with state-of-the-art testing equipment, took samples from our well, the creek, and surrounding properties. Results: our water was cleaner than city municipal supply. The only contamination detected came from subdivision storm drains carrying lawn chemicals. Another Karen. Plan, another spectacular backfire. But the psychological pressure was real. Daily harassment, constant legal threats, community tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The smell of diesel exhaust from surveillance vehicles mixed with the natural ranch scent, creating an atmosphere of siege. Mrs. Rodriguez organized neighborhood support, bringing coffee and solidarity during the worst of it. "Mijo," she said, "bullies count on wearing you down, but we're not going anywhere." The breaking point came when Karen hired a private investigator to dig into my military service and personal finances. The PI violated privacy laws accessing protected records, giving us grounds for criminal charges against both him and Karen. But here's what Karen didn't understand about veterans. We face real enemies, real danger, real consequences. Her suburban psychological warfare was amateur hour compared to actual combat stress. 3 days before the county hearing, Karen made her final desperate move. She organized a community safety rally at the disputed entrance, inviting local media to witness her courageous stand against military extremism. Perfect. Let her dig the hole even deeper. The evening quiet felt different now. Not peaceful, but pregnant with approaching storm. Roosevelt sensed the tension, staying closer to the house, protective instincts alert. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation. Karen's desperation reached nuclear levels with her emergency community safety meeting scheduled for the morning of our county hearing. She'd invited Channel 12 News, claiming to expose government cover-up of environmental hazards and veteran extremism. The setup was pure theater. HOA Community Center packed with suburban residents, concerned parent talking points printed on official letterhead, and Karen positioned at a podium like she was running for office. Our children's safety is being threatened by illegal agricultural operations and an unstable individual with military weapons training. She announced to the cameras. The edited Ring doorbell footage played on a big screen. Our gentle cattle transformed into menacing beasts through creative editing. But Karen's performance had a problem. Half her audience knew it was garbage. The reasonable HOA board member sat in the back, arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable with extremist rhetoric. Meanwhile, Bradley was implementing his own escape plan. My financial sources revealed Whitfield Development had quietly filed bankruptcy, attempting to shield personal assets from the coming fraud investigation. He was preparing to throw Karen under the bus if the legal situation became untenable. The restraining order created Karen's perfect trap, with me legally prohibited from approaching HOA property. She scheduled the media event precisely when our cattle needed to cross near the disputed entrance for their normal pasture rotation. Her plan: claim the cattle movement violated the restraining order, demand my immediate arrest, and force me to miss the county hearing from jail. Brilliant strategy if you ignore the fact that I'd anticipated exactly this move. The professional cattle contractor I'd hired was a retired Marine named Jake Morrison, who understood precision operations under hostile conditions. Jake moved our cattle, using a route that stayed precisely outside the restricted zone, GPS verified to the foot. But Karen wasn't satisfied with legal victories. She wanted dramatic confrontation for the cameras. Despite the restraining order, Karen drove her Mercedes to the boundary of the disputed area during the cattle movement. When Jake politely asked her to move her vehicle for safety reasons, she immediately called 911, claiming assault by military extremist associates. The arriving police officer was Tom Bradley, no relation to the developer, a veteran himself who'd known my family for years. One look at the scene, professional cattle handling, clearly marked boundaries, and Karen screaming about coordination between dangerous veterans told him everything. "Ma'am," Officer Bradley said with Texas patience, "these gentlemen are conducting legal agricultural operations on private property. You're the one creating a disturbance." Karen's meltdown was spectacular. She demanded Tom arrest Jake for criminal conspiracy, accused me of using military connections to corrupt local police, and threatened to expose the conspiracy to federal authorities. All on camera, all recorded, all perfect evidence for tomorrow's hearing. The state environmental report arrived that afternoon, like a gift from heaven. Comprehensive analysis confirmed our ranch operations were environmentally beneficial, while the subdivision's stormwater management violated multiple state regulations. The report recommended our ranch as a model for sustainable land use, while requiring the HOA to implement expensive upgrades to their drainage systems. But the final nail in Karen's coffin was her own social media activity. Screenshots revealed private messages where she admitted the harassment campaign was about protecting property values and removing undesirable elements. No mention of safety concerns or environmental protection, just economic discrimination and social prejudice. Mrs. Rodriguez's intelligence network had been busy, too. HOA meeting minutes revealed Karen's real agenda. Forced ranch sale. Enable Phase 2 subdivision development. Increase HOA property values through community expansion. Everything documented, everything preserved, everything ready for court. The evening before the hearing, Karen made one last desperate play. She appeared on local news claiming government conspiracy to silence concerned citizens and protect military cronies. The interview was painful to watch. Karen interrupting questions, making wild accusations, and generally looking like someone who'd lost touch with reality. The reporter actually asked if she was feeling well. But my favorite moment came when the reporter asked about our family's 70-year history on the land. "That doesn't matter," Karen snapped. "Times change. Communities evolve. We can't let sentiment interfere with progress." 70 years of Texas ranch heritage dismissed as sentiment on camera for broadcast throughout the county. If I'd scripted Karen's self-destruction, I couldn't have written it better. The night air carried familiar scents, hay, leather, and that clean smell of the creek running over limestone. Roosevelt stood at the fence line, massive and calm, like he understood that tomorrow would settle everything. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped by with coffee and encouragement. "Mijo, that woman's dug her own grave. Tomorrow, you just need to show up and let her bury herself." 12 hours until the county hearing. Karen had spent months setting the perfect trap for herself. The county courthouse meeting room was packed beyond fire code limits by 9 a.m. Local media, affected homeowners, ranch supporters, curious spectators, and a few folks who just loved watching train wrecks in real time. Karen arrived fashionably late in full business attire, radiating the confidence of someone who'd never lost a public argument. She brought back up 3 HOA board members, her lawyer, and Bradley lurking in the back row like he didn't want to be associated with the proceedings.